Show.
This is the Blairing Out with Eric Blair Show, and today I'm pleased to have lead vocalist of Black Flag, the Circle Jerks, and now the band Off, Keith Morris.
Hello.
How you doing?
I'm doing all right. How you doing, Eric?
Good. How was the ride on the 55 or the 101?
Oh,
or
it's the 32 to the 98 to the Zero Freeway, and then you look at Disneyland and then try to race past all of the people getting on the freeway. But I planned it out because I hate driving on the freeway when it's bumper to bumper, just like everybody else, road rage, wanting to kill people, blow things up. So I planned my driving moves, so it was all right. It was quite pleasant.
Cool.
I didn't have to pull over to take a whiz, listen to some loud music on the way down. It was good.
Cool. What is your mode of transportation right now?
My mode of transportation is the Seafoam Green 1993 Toyota Tercel that you would look at it and you would go, oh God, what a piece of junk. And I fill it once a month. I fill the tank up once a month, and that way I don't have to become a slave to the oil companies. And it gets me from point A to point B, and then from point B back to point A, and that's all I need.
Do you fill it up once a month?
Yeah, I put like $25 worth of gas in it once a month.
Oh, that's because you live in LA, so you can walk around places.
I try to walk as much as possible. I'm really opposed to the insurance companies. I'm opposed to like going to an event and paying $20 to park. I'm opposed to getting out there and mixing it up with all of the people that don't really want to be out there driving. You know, they have other things on their mind, and it's like, you know, who needs people honking at you and yelling at you and waving their fists at you and calling you not very nice names?
Effer.
You know, who wants to there's a zen to driving, and I at one point had become very much able to go with the flow, but then something snapped and I became like all the other drivers. So it's a good thing that I'm not a gun owner. It's actually a good thing that I don't work out. I'm not a weightlifter. I'm not a big guy. I'm not one of those guys that can throw my weight around, because I would probably end up getting run over or, you know, something fun like that.
How did you come to join Black Flag?
I didn't really join Black Flag. Joining Black Flag wasn't really part of the scenario. I had met Greg Ginn through his sister Erica. I was working part-time at a record store, and of course the music that was being played in the record store was, I wouldn't want to mention it, but it was pretty much sunshiny, Laurel Canyon, California, Buckingham Nicks before they joined Fleetwood Mac, and we had some Bruce Springsteen, like the first 3 Bruce Springsteen records, which they're not bad records, but it's just not stuff that I want to sit around listening to. Joni Mitchell, Linda Ronstadt, a little bit of prog rock. I mean, that was interesting. That kept things kind of on edge. Nothing loud, nothing obnoxious, nothing in your face, nothing saying, hey, let's party. In the situation, Erica would bring Greg into the record store. The guy that owned the record store, Michael Piper, fell madly in love with Erica, who everybody was in love with Erica because she was just Erica Ginn. She was a goddess. Maybe, probably still is. I've not seen her in years. I hang out with Raymond, who is part of the Ginn clan, but she looks nothing like Raymond or her older brother Greg, thankfully. And Michael he and Erica would go off and do what young lovers, young people in love would do, and that is hold hands and skip on the beach and, go watch seagulls fly at the end of the Hermosa Pier. And while they were out doing their lovey-dovey thing, I would bust out the Ted Nugent or the Black Sabbath, maybe some MC5, New York Dolls, anything loud and obnoxious, even Aerosmith.
The Stooges.
The Stooges. If it was there in the store, I would just grab it and play it. And Greg was glad that I would do that, because what I was doing was I was exposing him to that music. So he too had grown tired of what Michael was playing in the store. And I remember one time Erica had purchased a gift certificate for Greg, and Michael had written on the bottom, no Black Oak, Arkansas, on the, like, you can't purchase Black Oak, Arkansas. It's kind of like this mentality of we got to keep it like this rather than like this. Anyways, what cemented my friendship with Greg Ginn was the fact that we were interested in this more obnoxious music, this more in-your-face, I would say more vibrant music, more voluminous music. But we, the three of us, which would be Michael, Greg, and myself, decided that we were going to go to we were going to attend a Journey and Thin Lizzy show at the Santa Monica Civic. And so we drove down to the Santa Monica Civic in my Chevy Impala, acting like a bunch of goofy guys getting ready to go party and listen to some loud music. And that pretty much cemented my friendship with Greg Ginn. And from that point on, Greg would be like, I play guitar and I've written some songs. And I was curious as to, okay, what do you got going on? And he said, well, I can't just like strum them and play them for you. We need to be in a room where I can just plug into something and like bust out an electric guitar. That would be the first Black Flag rehearsal. One of our situations was we were trying to determine and try to figure out who were going to be the rhythm section of the band, who was going to play bass, who was going to play drums. And my best friend in high school, who died down here on the Harbor Freeway about 2 years after I graduated from Maricosta in Manhattan Beach, Jeff Migdal, he was my best friend in high school. His younger brother, Brian, ended up being the first drummer in Black Flag. And he went out and wrangled a bass player who was this big, tall, skinny, scrawny, totally out of his mind cat from Kansas, somewhere in Kansas. And he played bass, just barely. I guess he kind of played bass like Sid Vicious played bass in the Sex Pistols. Sid Vicious would show up and he would be so messed up that he couldn't even play. So they just, let Paul Cook's kick pedal, turn that up and that'll cover the bass end. That didn't last very long. I mean, before we had the kid from Kansas, we had Spot play bass. Spot was just this cat who was a photographer for the local throwaway weekly newspaper. He played bass off and on here and there just to fill in as a bass player. Raymond Pettibone, Ginn, played bass a couple of times, but it wasn't what it was supposed to be. It was kind of a mumble jumble. But leading up to that, I was going to play drums, but but I didn't have a drum kit. I had a friend offer to sell me a drum kit that he had stolen from one of our other friends. And I knew that that situation wasn't going to work because both of the guys were my friends, and I would have ended up getting drawn and quartered. I would have ended up getting tossed off the end of the Hermosa Pier for shark bait or crab bait or something like that. And one day we were in the SST workspace. They were listening to the radio. I'd been drinking, so it was about 1 in the afternoon, and I was already, I was already in my party frame of mind. And Iggy and the Stooges came on the radio, Search and Destroy. And I do remember jumping up on a desk and kicking everything off the desk while one of the guys that worked at SST was sitting there. All of a sudden, all of his stuff is on the floor, and he's freaking out, and I'm jumping up and down, and I'm screaming the lyrics along to the song, and then I do some kind of like backflip or somersault off the desk, and I land face first on the floor, and then I jump up, and there was a big sofa in the middle of the room, and I went running for the sofa, and I jumped up on one of the arms of the sofa and leapt all the way across the sofa and once again landed on my face. The whole time I'm screaming and yelling the lyrics. And once the song is over, and I'm like panting and sweating, and I've got all of these scrapes on my face, and I got dirt all over my arms and my hands and all over my clothes, just because the hardwood floor never got swept. I mean, it was just, nobody cared. So I'm covered in dust and dirt, and I'm panting, and I've turned red, and my eyes are red, and I'm ready to like strangle somebody or punch a hole in the wall or something like that. Greg looks up at me and says, you're not going to play drums in Black Flag. You're the vocalist. That's how that was decided.
Some of your highlights with Black Flag.
Polliwog Park was definitely a highlight. That was when Greg had managed to finagle, swindle, convince the guy at the Manhattan Beach Parks and Recreation that we were a jazz band that also played Fleetwood Mac covers.
Nice.
And what had happened was the Air Force Orchestra, I guess apparently somebody in the string section came down with the flu. And in an orchestra, it goes from like the violin player to the cello player to the guy that plays timpani drums to the guy that plays crashing cymbals. So the flu just gets passed on, because they're all sleeping together and, doing what orchestras do and kissing each other and making out. And so they're passing the flu on to each other. So I guess the entire string section had the flu. So they had to cancel, and they had Black Flag play. And much to his dismay, and when I say his, that would be the guy in charge of the Manhattan Beach Parks and Recreation, he couldn't believe what he had gotten himself into. Because we launched into our set, and all of the picnicking families started...
Run for your life.
Well, they weren't running. They were throwing things. They were chucking things. It was like watermelon rinds, cantaloupe rinds, half-eaten pieces of Kentucky Fried Chicken, cans and bottles, and it was raining food. Chuck Dukowski, our bass player, Chuck the Duke, actually at one point stopped and picked up a sandwich that was wrapped in like one of those fold over, there were no Ziplocs at the time, so it was one of those fold over baggy sandwich bags that you'd give to your kids for school for lunchtime. Yeah. And So he picked up a couple of those. So he had sandwiches for later on in the, after we got through playing. But it was raining food. The guy from the Parks and Recreation had to sweep up in front of us, and he was really upset because of the language that I was using. At one point he said, well, no, we've got families here in the park and you can't use the kind of language that you're using. You can't say the words that you're saying. You can't be screaming this stuff. And I think my response was, so I can't say, like, he was saying you can't, no four-letter words, which eliminates math and love and hate, rent, cash, all sorts of fantastic words like that. So to put it mildly, we didn't get over very well with the people in our community. We obviously had figured out a way to light a fire under the asses of the South Bay community. That was a highlight. That was definitely a highlight. And I also remember after we got through playing at Polliwog Park, we invited all of the people that came in the band shell. There were about 400 or 500 people in the band shell. We invited them to come to the church where we were rehearsing and living, and there was Red Cross rehearsing in the basement. And
that was the church?
That was the church in Hermosa Beach. We invited everybody to come down to the party, and we were playing in the main room, and I looked at Robo, and all of a sudden one of his cymbal stands fell over, and the cymbal hit the mic cord. So that was it for vocals that night. That was the end of the show. But I think there were probably about 200-300 people at the church for the after party.
Cool.
That was very memorable.
What do you remember about recording the Nervous Breakdown EP?
We were in a recording studio up above a bar on the corner of Pier Avenue and Hermosa Avenue. And the band downstairs was playing so loud that it was coming up through the hardwood floors in the recording studio. And I guess our thing was, because we didn't know, well, you need to have this level and you don't want it to go into the red, and we didn't know any of that stuff. We just plugged in and cranked it and played.
Yeah.
So I do remember Greg playing in a hallway with all of his equipment set at the end of the hallway. And I remember the recording engineer, Dave Tarling, kept saying, what is this? They just keep coming at me. What is this? We had luckily found this recording studio. It was just like right down the alleyway from the church where we rehearsed. So it was real easy just to carry our equipment from the church to the recording studio. We didn't even have to load into a van and drive around and come down and find a parking space and all of that. We just, like the good little workers that we were, the happy black flaggers that we were, we just moved our equipment down the alleyway. And I believe that Red Cross also recorded there later on, and I believe their situation was the Plimsolls had just finished their recording, their first recording, and they were coming out. They were loading out as we were carrying Red Cross's equipment in. So we got to meet all of the guys in the Plimsolls, Peter Case, and hanging out with Red Cross. It was a big party. It was great. It was a fantastic time.
And then briefly, why did you leave Black Flag?
Because I'm an idiot. I didn't know any better. I found myself constantly being the excuse for the lack of progress in the band, I guess would be the best way to say it, would be we weren't learning songs fast enough. We weren't like moving forward fast enough the way that the other guys in the band wanted it to. When I left, I have a set list at home from the last show that I played with Black Flag. and there were 16 songs on the set list. And there were 4 songs written to the side, which were the 4 new songs that we were working on. You know, I was trying to learn the lyrics, writing a few lyrics. Greg was still, you know, dicking around with some of the arrangement, but we weren't we weren't in the same mode as we were early on. They had started to become very like workmanlike, and they had a pattern of wanting to rehearse every night for a minimum 3 hours, and that would be Monday through Sunday. And there's other things to do besides just being this band, and we're not really playing that many shows, so it's kind of like we're just doing this to entertain ourselves. And being the guy that everybody blamed for lack of progress, or, well, you're doing too much cocaine, or you're an alcoholic, or you're an idiot, or you're just a little monkey on a chain, and we got to put you in the cage, and we got to let you out of the cage, and we're afraid that you're going to run off and climb up the side of a building somewhere, or, you know, we're not moving the way that we're supposed to be moving. And all of a sudden we were arguing, and there were all these confrontations and all this verbal abuse, and I just got tired of it, and I wasn't having fun. And if you're in a band and you're not having fun, you better be making lots of money, because otherwise it just, you know, or you better be like ultra creative and, you know, one of the most swell characters in the world, because it's just not worth it. And I just got to the point where I was tired of being in a room and it would be 3 against 1. Mm-hmm. Like, why am I arguing with you guys? It's not even worth arguing with you guys, because you're right, I'm wrong. And so I just eventually left.
Okay, so then what was the impetus to form the Circle Jerks?
I had been living at the church. At the church, we had Red Cross rehearsing in the basement with Ron Reyes was playing drums. Ron Reyes would be my replacement, my vocal replacement in Black Flag. And that to me was totally appropriate, because Ron would sit outside the door in the hallway while Black Flag was rehearsing. He'd grab himself a 6-pack, he'd station himself down on the floor, and he'd sit there and he'd drink while we were rehearsing. So he knew the vocals, he knew the lyrics, he knew all the rhythms, and he knew the songs and the stops and the starts. So it was totally appropriate for him to replace me, and they couldn't have picked a better guy to replace me. And I love Ron. I just saw him up in Vancouver. He's doing great, fantastic.
Cool.
The impetus to form the Circle Jerks was that, having always gone against the flow, like being in Black Flag was always kind of going against what everybody said you were supposed to be a part of. And so constantly going against the flow. But occasionally things happen in your life where events take place that there's a reason for them, that maybe you can't explain them. But being in the church and having Red Cross in the basement, when Ron quit playing drums for Red Cross to become the vocalist for Black Flag, Red Cross auditioned a drummer, and that would be Lucky Blair. The McDonald brothers, Stephen and Jeffrey, didn't like Lucky because he wasn't sloppy, he wasn't oompa oompa oompa, New York Dolls. You know, he wasn't the guy that listened to the New York Dolls or Johnny Thunders or Kiss.
He was busy.
He was out of the big band swing jazz, Gene Krupa, Buddy Rich, Louis Bellison. He came out of that school. So he had more going for him than just your typical rock drummer. They auditioned Lucky one day, and they'd got through with the audition. Lucky and Greg Hetson came out of the rehearsal space, and they were shaking their heads. They were really bummed out. It was apparently Greg had grown tired of the brothers not wanting to rehearse, which was kind of the opposite of Black Flag. So you had the sloppy kids downstairs and you had the older guys upstairs, and it was like the North Pole and the South Pole. Anyways, Greg and Lucky come out of the rehearsal space. They're really bummed. Greg's kind of depressed, and I'm looking at them, and I want to know why. And they explain what had happened and how Lucky came in and played the songs and maybe was a little too proficient. And Greg said, I'm not playing with them anymore. So I looked at, I'd not heard Lucky. I'd not heard any of the audition, the Red Cross audition. So I'm looking at Lucky and I'm looking at Greg, and I said, well, it looks like we've got a drummer, a guitarist, and a vocalist. Now all we need to do is find a bassist. And we all agreed that, you know, we'll get in a room somewhere and bash out a few tunes. In that process, I was hanging out at a club called the Anti-Club over on Melrose. It's no longer there. I believe they turned it into a parking lot, which is really sad. It was a great space. Saw a lot of amazing bands in that room, the Dills and the Angry Samoans, the Leaving Trains.
E.G. Daly's mom owned that bar, didn't she? The Anti-Club?
Yes, yeah. But it's now, they've turned it into like a clothing store or a t-shirt shop or someplace tourists go to get beach towels or whatever they turned it into. It's no longer there, which is sad. Anyways, getting back to the Anti-Club, sitting out leaning against the wall with a bag of beer, that was part of the punk rock outfit or the punk rock costume. 40 ouncer wrapped in a bag of beer. That way the cops couldn't see what you were drinking. Like, okay, I'm drinking, but they can't see what I'm drinking. Like, okay, the paper bag kind of makes it invisible, or that's some form of camouflage or whatever. But anyways, drinking the 40 ounce, or all of a sudden this guy's sitting next to me, and he's kind of nudging me, and he wants a toe off of the 40 ounce, and it's like, yo, bro, get your own, you know? What the hell's up with that?
Yeah.
And as it turns out, it's Roger Rogerson, who is going to become the bass player in the Circle Jerks. So that's how the Circle Jerks got together.
All right, then let's talk about how the deal with Lisa Fancher's Frontier Records came about.
The Circle Jerks first record deal, and we had quite a few. You know, it's like each time we put a record out, we were putting a record out with somebody new, somebody exciting, somebody fresh, somebody vibrant, somebody with some kind of new idea and some big, huge marketing plan, and they're going to make us ultra mega superstars. And the deal with Lisa Fancher and Frontier Records basically came about because she was a fan of the band. I mean, normally that's what happens. You don't want to sign with a record label knowing that they don't like what you're doing. That would be completely ridiculous. Unless they're giving you $1 zillion. Mm-hmm. And then of course it's like, okay, take the money and run. See ya. She presented us with the contract, which was 2 pages long. I mean, your mom could have read it and told you that, you know, everything's fine. It was punk rock. It was like, times are exciting. Everybody's drinking and partying and things are flying and people are shooting photos and there's 10 bands on a bill out in the roller rink in Orange County for $5, and everybody was running really hard and really fast, so it was not really paying attention to a lot of the stuff that we maybe should have been paying attention to. But that's okay, because we were young, We were excited. There were no rules. There were no managers saying, well, this is what you do. You sign here on the dotted line, and this is what it leads to. And you do all of these things in between that make it look like you're a band and you're doing all of the work that you're supposed to. And you do the interviews and you do the photo shoots and you talk to these people and you go over there and you play there and, you know, we'll fly you over there and you'll take this boat to get there and you'll do this and do that. And it wasn't like that. It was just the way that I would describe the whole punk rock scene in Los Angeles was going into your kitchen and turning the light on and watching all of the roaches scramble to wherever they're scrambling to. Just a big free-for-all. And it was very festive. It was very party-like. The ego tripping and the head space, all of the like backstabbing kind of stuff was so few and far between that it was almost non-existent. I mean, there were a few bands that thought that they were better than other bands. I mean, you're always going to have that, but for the most part, it was just this free-for-all. It was, every band had their own personality. Every band had their own sound. And one of the things that really bummed me out at the time was that we had the scene in England and we had the scene in New York. And then the next big scene of any kind of musical like happening content would have been LA, but LA kept getting overlooked. It was like all of the bands in England and all of the bands in New York, they were all getting signed to record labels. You know, they were getting signed to like major record labels, not just indie labels, but the majority of them were getting signed to major labels with major label kind of deals where you don't just sign a deal and put out an album and then go on your merry way. When you sign a deal with a major label, you're usually signing for a minimum 3 to 5 albums. So all of a sudden, all of these new little labels started popping up, and that would be Lisa Fancher. So I just talked in a full circle because I like talking in circles. I'll like go off on tangents and not come back to where I'm supposed to come back to. But this time I came back because there you have Frontier Records, there was Danger House, there was Slash.
I want you to tell me about the cover for Group Sex, which is your first album. I've heard a lot of legendary stories about that was a party that got thrown together with like pretty much everybody in the punk scene.
The shoot for the Circle Jerks' first album cover wasn't premeditated. We happened to play a mock wedding at the Marina del Rey skate park for a couple of members of the Germs entourage. Yeah. Getting back to that party, festive, everybody just like getting together to have a good time. I believe that it was either Social Distortion or the Adolescents played with us, but there were like 400 or 500 people there. And at one point, I'd noticed that one of our friends, photographer named Ed Culver, who was going to all of the shows and shooting pics of all of the bands, happened to be there with his camera. So I went up to him and I said, could you do me a favor? I'll get everybody to gather down in the bowl. Basically the bowl at a skate park, a bowl would basically be shaped like a swimming pool. So that's what it was. I just went around and gathered a bunch of people to get down in the pool, and Ed took the photo, and that was the album cover.
Do you remember who was in that? I mean, the Germs were in that crowd. I think Lorna was in there. Darby, I think, was in there.
Rob Hensley. Gerber Bell. Mm-hmm. In the photo itself, Potato Head, X-Head, who is one of the guys one of the people that are interviewed in the black and white interview section of The Decline of Western Civilization Part 1. Casey Royer, the drummer. I'm thinking because Casey was there, that meant that the Adolescents played with us, because Casey was the drummer of the Adolescents. Roger, our bass player, and his girlfriend at the time, LB, Laura Bennett, they're in the photo. They actually, somebody posted the photo on, not the photo, but the album cover on Facebook. And everybody started chiming in as to, well, that's this person and that's that person. And Critter was in the photo, and maybe Melissa Hutton. And Melissa is responsible. I was partying with Melissa and Darby Crash one night, and that was when I got my germs burn, if you can.
I didn't even know you had one of those, Keith. Wait a second. Do you actually have one?
Right there. That's my germs burn.
Man. So then that album comes out, and it's would you consider it successful?
World altering. Just it shattered all myths and conceptions of all the music before it. Very successful record. It pretty much, when that record came out, it allowed us to get in the van and go to other places, and that would be called touring. We got a call from a promoter on the East Coast. He booked the Irving Plaza in New York. And he said, well, if you're coming to play Irving Plaza, we got to make this a financial happening so we can cover the cost of your hotels, we can cover the cost of your flights. And in this process, you're not just going to play one or two shows, you'll end up playing like 4 or 5 shows. So we end up playing in Washington, D.C. with Minor Threat at the 930 Club. We end up playing Irving Plaza with the Stimulators and the Necros from Maumee, Ohio as the opening band. We played a show at the Mud Club, and the Mud Club was particularly outstanding because there was nobody there. Absolutely nobody there. Like, we played to this big open room.
That's awesome.
But there was a bartender and a waitress and a bar back and the doorman and the sound man and Cheetah Chrome from the Dead Boys running around piling all of the furniture that wasn't fixed to the floor, piling it in front of the stage, like he has this look of a madman, like a kid in a candy store, a kid at Toys R Us, just like, here, get whatever you want. And he's running around and he's freaking out and he's jumping up and down, and basically he was entertaining us because we weren't really, how can you get excited to playing to nobody? It's like a rehearsal. Let's
move on to the Penelope Spheres documentary. What was it like being a part of that, The Decline of Western Civilization?
What happened with Penelope and the documentary Decline of Western Civilization Part 1 was, I was at a like a punk rock performance somewhere, and I'd come up out of the cavern, and I was in the parking lot, and she came up to me and she said, Keith, I'm filming this documentary and I want you to be a part of it. And I had just quit Black Flag, and I had just put together the Circle Jerks. And she said, Keith, I want to film Black Flag, but I want to film Black Flag with you as the vocalist. Now all of a sudden, I'm given the assignment of, having to learn to moonwalk, or, become an astronaut, or learn brain surgery or what have you, by having to go back to Greg Ginn and saying, look, she wants to put Black Flag in the documentary. She told me that she'd already filmed X, and she'd already filmed Catholic Discipline, but she rattled off a bunch of bands that she wanted to film. And anyways, I went back to Greg Ginn. I knew that he was going to say no, but I asked him anyways. I ran it by him, and he pretty much just laughed in my face. So I knew that I wasn't going to be performing with Black Flag. So I went back to Penelope and said, my situation with Black Flag is non-existent. She said, well, I still want to film you. You need to be in this. For some reason, I was like one of her favorite vocalists. So it's like, okay, maybe she thought that I epitomized everything that was like going on in the scene, because I was at all of these places and I always had beer and I was dressed a certain way and doing obnoxious things and throwing people's record collections out of the third-story window at a party where somebody decided they were going to play the Partridge Family or something like that. And so she said, look, put together a show. I want to come and film your band. What happened was I ended up helping put together a show down at the Fleetwood in Redondo Beach that had Fear, Alice Bag Band, the Circle Jerks, the Gun Club, the Urinals, and the Gears. And that was a show. It was like $5 to get in. You know, it's like you're never going to see a gathering like that. I mean, you might go to a festival somewhere and pay, you know, $300, but she ended up filming Fear and the Alice Bag Band. She ended up filming the Circle Jerks. I believe she filmed a little bit of the Gun Club, because Jeffrey Lee Pierce and the Gun Club were on her husband's record label, Slash. Ruby, yeah. And
so Penelope Spheres was married to the owner of Slash Records?
Yes, Bob Biggs. I never heard any mumblings or grumblings from anybody except the Gears. The Gears were wondering why they weren't included, and it was, I didn't have anything to do with it. And I just helped put this show together, you know. You would need to talk to Penelope about why you were not included in the documentary. And that documentary pretty much at that time said, this is us. This is what we do. And like it or love it, like it or leave it, this is what happens in LA when you come to these shows.
How did you see the shift in your future with the Circle Jerks after that movie came out?
Well, we were still in party mode, so we were just excited. And what the movie did, it was kind of like a demo that you would give to a club owner or a promoter. You know, we didn't know that you give the owner of the Whiskey A Go-Go a cassette tape so he can listen to your band and go, wow, I like your band, so, you know, smoking on his cigar, wow, yeah, so you can play, you can be the opening band next Monday night, you know, and it's like, all right, yeah, just tell us what time to be there. We didn't know that there was a certain procedure as to how you went about procuring or getting shows.
Two highlights for the Circle Jerks.
We were on tour promoting our last record, which came out like 14 years ago or 13 years ago or whenever it came out. And we were performing at a nightclub called Mississippi Nights in St. Louis. Really cool club that was on the Mississippi River. Well, not on the Mississippi River, but on the bank of the Mississippi River. And we're jamming, and the punk rock kids are jumping around, and there's all sorts of bodies flying, and the mohawks, and the leather jackets, and, you know, all of the punker dunkers are going ape shit, and they're having a good time, and all of a sudden, there's a break between songs, like Greg's got to tune up, or somebody needs to take a sip of water, or broke a bass string, or whatever. All of a sudden, a guy comes up to the front of the stage, and one of the bouncers grabs our roadie and says, you need to talk to this guy. Something's happening here. You need to get something going on here. And so our roadie came back and he said, that guy right there at the front of the stage, that's Chuck Berry. Wow. And he wants to come up and he wants to play with you.
Wow.
And of course, in a situation like that, how do you not say yes? Our guitar player worships at the feet of Angus Young and AC/DC. Okay, so you listen to AC/DC and you listen to Angus Young, who worships at the altar of Chuck Berry. It's like Chuck Berry played the template. It's like if you're a guitar player and you don't have any Chuck Berry in somewhere in whatever you play, then you're not really a guitar player. Go off and play with yourself and play with your guitar.
Well, for those who don't know, who are idiots, Chuck Berry is the architect of rock and roll.
Well, that would be Johnny B. Good, Roll Over Beethoven, just to name a few. Round and Round. The Germs covered Round and Round. Mm-hmm. Well, the joint was rocking, going round and round. You would have no Keith Richards. You would have no Rolling Stones. Even a lot of the Beatle riffs are based in Chuck Berry. The Beach Boys, they played a couple of Chuck Berry covers. Even the Beach Boys, yes. So here's Chuck Berry. Greg's got an extra SG. We finally got to the point where we were smart enough to bring an extra guitar along in case he broke a string and there was nobody there to change the string. So he had a backup guitar. And he was playing a split Marshall stack with a couple of amplifiers rather than just a amp. And they had him hooked up and he was ready to go in 5 minutes. Greg looked at the band and said, just follow along, play out a C, and you won't find out what he's really playing until he gets to the chorus and he starts singing the chorus. Guys just start playing. He starts jumping around. And I'm in awe. I mean, this is one of my heroes, one of my musical heroes. I had Chuck Berry, one of the first records that I ever bought was a double album. It was Chuck Berry's Golden Decade, which was like all of his hits. And that record didn't leave my turntable for a month and a half, 2 months, every day, like 8 times a day. He starts playing, they start playing. Kids are going apeshit because what I had to do is I had to explain to them the reason why he's here. And, you know, I explained to him there would be no Keith Richards. And if there was no Keith Richards, there would be no Johnny Thunders. If there was no Johnny Thunders and there would be no Joe Perry, there would be no Angus Young. And these are all guitar players that Greg listens to. There would be no Circle Jerks. We wouldn't even be here. I wouldn't even be giving you this lecture. So he starts playing, the band starts playing, everybody's jumping around, songs jamming, sounds really great. I don't know, I don't pay attention to monitors. Whenever we play, it was just that I grew up playing in garages and playing backyard parties and playing in people's basements, so there was never monitors. In the early days of Black Flag, there were never monitors. It was like, I gotta, like, hopefully Robo's hitting the drums hard enough where I can feel them. And Greg's playing loud enough that, you know, I can hear the guitar riffs because all of the vocals come off of the guitar riffs. So I'm used to, you know, if we do a sound check, yeah, I'll pretend that I'm, like, paying attention to the monitors. I don't really care, you know? It's like, I know the songs. I feel the songs. You gotta, like, you know, there's certain things that are happening that you can feel. And they're just like rock, and I can't hear what he's singing. But he gets to the chorus, and all of a sudden the chorus stands out, and he's singing Roll Over Beethoven, and it's like, he's looking at me like, you got to be joining me on this, man. And I'm looking at him going like, are you kidding? I'm like, I'm on stage with one of the greatest guys in music ever. So anyways, after we get through playing, as he's leaving the club, because he's a regular member of the club, He's got his restaurant down the street, so he's always in the neighborhood. He splits later on after we're through and all the money's been counted and they've sold all the t-shirts and the stickers and everybody's winding down and I'm drinking water and just kind of figuring out when the hell we're going to get out of here and go to the hotel so I can go to sleep or whatever. The owner of the club comes up to me and he said, you know, Chuck Berry told me before he left that you are one of the greatest rock bands that he's ever seen.
Wow.
And to have a compliment like that from a guy of his stature, you know, that's better than when Joe Strummer came up to me and said, you know, I really appreciate your body of work. As much as I love Joe Strummer, as much as I love The Clash, to have Chuck Berry make the comment that he made to the club owner and then the club owner passing it on to me, I was floored. I was like, you know what, I don't care about anything else after this. I I'm being yelled at by one of the concert promoters. There's some kid on the phone. Come over here and talk to this kid. It's like, well, we're getting ready to do a sound check. We just pulled up, we're unloading our equipment, and you're making this demand. So I get on the phone and it's a kid, the kid is crying. And so I ask him, so what's the problem? And he said, well, kids are picking on me at school. They're beating me up. They're throwing things at me. And I'm getting ready to commit suicide. And I'm thinking, wow, this is pretty heavy. So I said, so what's the deal? He said, well, I would have to, my parents won't give me a ride. None of my friends like your music. I would have to take a bus to come and see you. I said, okay, well, I'll put you on the guest list. You know, you can come out and you can have a fun night. And after I put him on the guest list, I start thinking, oh, it's probably just some kind of a ploy, you know, like some smart ass figured out a way to, you know, manipulate the lead singer of the band in order to get into a gig for free. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking to myself, you're just a moron. You're an idiot. How could you fall for that? You know, just an act. The kid shows up and he's got like a black eye. He's obviously been beat up. It didn't take a detective or a police officer or a cop to see, you know, he was totally disheveled. He was wearing a t-shirt and you could see where he'd been like trying to, you know, open veins in his arms. So obviously I had made this kid's night, you know, the Circle Jerks made this kid's night for one night. And apparently hopefully prevented a suicide. So to me, that was really important. You know, we played with so many bands. We've been to so many places. Mm-hmm. We've hung out with John Belushi, and you know, yep. We have all of these people that are fans. All of these guys, like Bill Ward, the drummer from Black Sabbath, is a huge Circle Jerks fan. My friend Ryan Adams, who's big in he was in a band called Whiskey Town. He's big in the alt country world. He's a huge fan. He hung out with Elton John. He played group sex for Elton John, and Elton John just like wigged out, like, how come I've never heard this before? You know, it's like all of a sudden you were earlier. You had brought up Lenny Warnaker, because we're getting ready to move into the Off World, which is the new band that I'm in.
Yep.
And our bassist Stephen McDonald being married to Anna Warnaker. Him working with Randy Newman. Randy Newman at one point said that the Circle Jerks were one of his favorite bands. So there are all of these different like compliments that are being paid, and it's just like really, really cool, you know?
The Blairing Out Show.